a very good sort of something that we can learn a lot from. It really exposes a lot of issues that we have today regarding propaganda and lack of critical thinking, and how these online parasites in independent media can easily manipulate people for profit. It's so easy to just distract and manipulate. And wow. So a massive ship hits a bridge and the bridge collapses, and immediately there is a lot of conversation about infrastructure and people implying that the bridge was falling apart and were not being taken care of, and the infrastructure bill didn't really do anything. And it's so bad that even the more honest media, like for example Breaking Points, even they did seem to do I'm using their kind of language, a highbrow bridge collapse conspiracy theory type of thing. So very, very clever, because they, on one hand, call out the dishonest actors out there trying to say the bridge was falling apart and trying to say, act as if the bridge just collapsed on its own, and not really, acknowledging that, hey, the bridge got knocked over. It didn't just fall down, right? So they point that out, while at the same time doing this sort of soft, sort of highbrow bridge collapse conspiracy theory by doing stuff like this. They'll say that, and then they'll say, let's have a conversation about, our nation's infrastructure. Now, this bridge collapse had nothing to do with infrastructure, right? Anyone who is talking about this and including in that a conversation about infrastructure is either clueless or trying to manipulate their audience, because it's nothing to do with infrastructure, right? I mean, technically, okay, the bridge is infrastructure and the bridge collapsed, but it didn't fall apart. It was knocked over, right? Now, the weight of, well, before we get, I'm gonna get into some of the technical details of that, but before we get into that, let me let you know how simple this is. It's a very simple thing. It's not complicated. So there's no explanation for why people are all over the place with all kinds of ideas about all kinds of theories, and talking about infrastructure and whatever, right? This is the way I looked at it. I initially, when I heard the story, I think I heard about it from mainstream media, and people like Breaking Points would lead you to believe that they're just the devil. There's lots of problems with mainstream media. They're very dishonest, very manipulative, very biased.
Motion detected in the front yard.
And generally speaking, you can't just trust what the mainstream media is telling you. You have to think for yourself, look into things. You can't just trust whatever they're feeding you, right? They're feeding you food. You can't just assume that there's no poison in the food, right? But that being said, mainstream media was the first source that referenced the potential reality, because like I said, you can't just trust what they're saying, that this type of bridge, the way it's designed, you hit one part, the whole thing falls apart. So right away, it was referenced to me, like before all the conspiracy theories and this and that and infrastructure, whatever. Right away, mainstream media, references that this bridge design might be such that this is what happens when it gets hit. This is how it is. It's not a bridge design that's very redundant where you can hit this part and the other part stays up, right? But is that true? Is it not true? Right? I don't just trust what mainstream media says. I don't trust what independent media. I actually look into things, and I don't let people say they do their own research. They don't really do their own research. What they do is they look for somebody else to do research for them, right? So if you believe the election was stolen, the way you do your own research is you look for someone else who has supposedly done research to tell you whether it's stolen or not. And more often than not, they're going to look for someone that aligns with their ideology. So they're going to find some right winger who's going to say, yeah, it was definitely stolen. And then they're going to say, oh, I did my research and I confirmed. I didn't just trust what the media said. I just trusted, oh, Ben Shapiro said, no, I looked into it. And when I looked into it, I found out, yeah, it was stolen, right? No. They said that this bridge design, potentially this is how it works. Okay. Sounds good. What did I do after that? I went to ChatGPT, and that's the thing. We have all these tools available to us. So if people really want to know what's going on, they can, right? You don't need to rely on these parasites online to spoon feed you everything, right? Now, ChatGPT is not perfect. Google searching online, if you don't have research skills, is not perfect. You can run into wrong information. But again, I got a little idea from mainstream media about the bridge design. Then I went from that and I went to ChatGPT, not looking for ChatGPT to confirm a bias or to confirm what the media is saying, but for ChatGPT to reveal the truth. So the way I asked the question was with that in mind. I didn't want any sort of bias in there. So I asked ChatGPT. I didn't ask anything about the bridge collapse or anything about the story. I didn't want it to get tangled up into that story and pick up on people's narratives. So I just said, I asked the question, simple question. What type of bridges, and I did this very methodically for a very good reason. I wanted to do everything I can to limit any kind of bias, right? So I said, what type of bridge designs? Can you list a bunch of bridge designs which are such that can take an impact from a large ship and not collapse, right? So I phrased it somewhat like that. And it gave me a list of designs of this type of bridge, or that type of bridge, or this type of bridge. Okay, that's not really what I wanted, but I'm asking things in a very, I'm being very methodical, piece by piece, trying to keep things away from getting into any kind of bias. So here's a list of designs which can maintain this kind of impact, right? So we know which design. So later on we can check and see what's the design of the bridge that collapsed. Is it one of the designs that can maintain, can sustain this kind of impact, right? We can evaluate that later. The next question I asked was, what type of bridge designs could potentially collapse from being hit by a ship, a large ship, for example? Gave me a list of designs. Referenced that these designs can collapse because they don't have redundancies and blah, blah, blah. Okay. So I have a list of all these designs. Then I asked it, could you tell me what type of, so the bridge that collapsed in Baltimore, can you tell me what type of bridge that was? And I think it said it was a truss style bridge. Don't quote me on that. I said, okay. So now we know the type of bridge that bridge was. And you notice what I did. I was very particular not to reference Baltimore or the collapse initially. I wanted it to give me generic details about the types of bridges that are really strong, the type of bridges that are susceptible to collapse because of a single impact, outside of the context of Baltimore or the recent news. Just give me that raw data, right? I don't want to talk about Baltimore and then ask that and then have Baltimore skew the details, right? So just tell me about generic stuff about bridge design. That's the first things I asked, right? Now that I have that generic details, now it's too late to go and flip things up, right? I said, tell me what bridge design of the bridge that collapsed in Baltimore. I think it said truss. Don't quote me on that. I think it said truss. Then I went and I cross-referenced that with a list of bridges that it said would collapse from an impact from a ship. And what do you know? That design was on there, and it explains why that bridge might collapse from a single impact from a ship. So there it is, mission solved, right? This is a type of bridge design that, regardless of its condition, is not designed to sustain an impact from this type of ship, right? Now, I went even deeper than that. Good to see you, and I'm not sure how to pronounce that. So so after I got that information, I wanted to know more details so I could share with you guys or give you an idea of the physics of what we're talking about. So what is the weight of some of the largest ships that we have, cargo ships, fully loaded. So I got a maximum weight of 400,000 tons. 400,000 tons. Then I looked up what the weight of a bridge like this bridge might have been, because I wanted to get an idea of what kind of mass do we have that's impacting what kind of mass, right? Because obviously, if you have something that is massively heavier than the object it's hitting, then the object it's hitting doesn't have much hope, right? But that can also give us an idea of what kind of power we're dealing with. So 400,000 tons being the weight of a potential ship like that. Then I said, what's the weight of a bridge like that? And I think I got something like 10,000 tons. Now, these numbers, don't quote these numbers. These are just to give you an idea. So you have potentially a 400,000 ton ship hitting into a 10,000 ton bridge, and you wonder why it collapsed. That is the equivalent of, so that would be the equivalent of I think it's 180,000 pound object colliding with your vehicle. You have a 4,500 pound vehicle being impacted by 180,000 pound object, which I think is 90 tons, if I'm not mistaken. So imagine 90 tons or 180,000 pound object impacting your 4,500 pound vehicle, and your vehicle just being totally destroyed, turned into a pancake. Now imagine having a conversation of, okay, so this happened. So this 180,000 ton thing hit a 4,500 pound car and flattened it. So do we need to have a conversation about vehicle construction, right? Let's talk about vehicle construction, right? What's wrong with vehicles that they are unable to sustain an impact from a 180,000 pound object? Like, what? And that's an extreme example. It's just matching, but I'm trying to match the scale of what happened with the bridge. But we can bring it down. We don't have to even be that extreme. Imagine an 18-wheeler fully loaded. I don't know offhand what that weight would be, but I know most people have an idea of how much weight that is. 18-wheeler fully loaded, a truck, right? Imagine that running into a compact vehicle, and again, turning it into a pancake. And then imagine, on one level, you have people saying, oh, this was a potential conspiracy. The car manufacturer purposely built the car with flaws that it collapsed, or some whatever, right? And then you have another side, this would be breaking points, going and calling them out and saying, no, the car was hit by an 18-wheeler. That's why it collapsed. But then also at the same point saying, later on today, we're going to talk about vehicle construction. Like there's no need to talk about vehicle construction after an 18-wheeler hits a compact car. I mean, the idea that we're going to design cars that can sustain an impact with such a truck like that's absurd. Now, that being said, someone with good critical thinking skills, hearing me say that, would have a nice rebuttal in saying that there are things that you can do to protect a bridge. Now, I don't know what. Yes, there's things like fenders and things like that you can do, but I don't know, even with that stuff, like whatever all the technology is that we have to protect bridges from this kind of thing, can even that maintain an impact? I guess it depends on the speed as well, right? Maintain an impact, resist an impact from such a heavy ship, right? Because just because you have a bridge, because I think this bridge didn't have fenders and things like that, but even if it did, I don't know if that means that it necessarily would have been able to take the hit and not fall over, because whatever you do to the bridge, again, still has to deal with that amount of mass, 400,000 tons hitting it, right? So I think in theory, the best thing that we could have is a different bridge design that is designed in such a way that it is not reliant, it doesn't have a single point of failure. So a bridge design where even with the fenders and whatever, I mean, that helps, but you'll still take out the post, but only one section of the bridge would be compromised. The rest of it would remain standing, right? We have bridge designs, if I'm not mistaken, that can do that, where the ship could have hit it and then the other parts would remain standing. But again, I think even in that design, I don't know that the part that got hit could resist the impact without collapsing. So the only thing is not a matter of can the bridge withstand an impact from a ship like that, because they may not be able to. The question is, can a bridge keep standing after having an impact like that? Even if the impact totally destroys this one section, is there a design of a bridge where the rest of it will still be up, so you can repair it much faster, right? I mean, and actually people that are on the bridge when it gets impacted might survive, right? If you're not at the impact point where the road might collapse, you could be on this bridge that had a section that has been destroyed, and you're in your car, and you can possibly get out of your car, reverse or run, and get off and survive, as opposed to the whole thing comes down and everybody on the bridge dies. So I don't know. I'm not a bridge expert, so I don't know if we have such a design. I would think so, and I would think those are probably larger bridges that have much more components to them to allow for, how is the rest of the bridge is independently supported. So you remove this support, it only affects that section because the middle has another support, the other end has another support, and the other side, the beginning has another support. So again, it's segmented. But this was not that type of bridge, right? And it's an old bridge. So, I mean, if you really want to be ridiculous and you really want to desperately have a conversation about infrastructure, then the conversation would be the idea of destroying a perfectly good bridge so you can rebuild it with a modern structure which is able to withstand a super rare, that's the other thing, you gotta it's like, imagine you're building a car and then you say, glass windows is not a good thing because glass can be shattered, right? What if you crash into a telephone pole? Do we have telephone pole? Telephone pole falls over, and in a storm, and you drive into it, it's going to come right through the glass. So now we need to redesign cars. This is like, what are the odds of that happening, right? You don't just design something just based on every single potential. You have to design it based on the average, right? It is extremely rare that we have, not only, comparatively speaking, right? Compared to how many ships are going around all the time with no issues, it's extremely rare that we can have a ship impacting a bridge at all. And then even from that, the odds that the ship that impacts a bridge happens to be a massive ship, also much, much lower. So, the idea of, spending the money, and, these are people who talk about the budget and the budget, we got a deficit, whatever. The idea of spending massive amounts of money to demolish an existing bridge that works fine, and then to construct a brand new bridge with some new design just for the off chance that it might get impacted by a massive ship. I mean, that is absolutely ludicrous. Now, the only thing that would potentially make sense is there a way to retrofit the existing bridge at a much, much lower cost? So you have to keep the existing bridge, but you add fenders to it. You add some kind of augmentation to the structure, where there's maybe additional support points, so you have this sort of segmented thing. Now, the idea of doing that to every single bridge in this country where a big ship might hit into it, the off chance that a big ship hits into it and hits, the right point and has the right weight. I mean, if you're worried about deficit, I mean, that would be an insane expense to go after. I think what would make more sense is measures to avoid the incident in the first place. First of all, is that even necessary? Because again, obviously this is not a thing that's happening on a regular basis. It's so rare that it may possibly mean that there's no action is required if we are to use some kind of logical system, in terms of our thought process. But I would think before we talk about messing with the bridge, we would talk about, you know, addressing, minimizing. I mean, it's already really low, but if you really want to do something, I think that's the first thing in terms of cost benefit ratio, right? Address the potential of the impact in the first place. Make it so that it's even less likely for the impact to happen in the first place. And there's things like that already. There's something called, I forgot what it's called. There's a thing where, there's a captain will get on the ship that's going to go through these bridges and be on there. So if I'm running a cargo ship and I'm going to run through an area that might run by this bridge, I might be required to take on this local captain. I don't know, government employed or whatever it is. Some local captain is going to come on my ship and is going to assist me in navigating to make sure this doesn't happen. And there's also the thing about tugboats. So you could use a tugboat to tug them through. So that I would look at that first before I look into, the massive cost of retrofitting a bridge, or even worse, destroying it and put it. But again, you see, when you seriously talk about infrastructure in a logical way, in a fact-based way, you see how absurd things get, because this is not an infrastructure conversation. This is not an infrastructure issue. This is a freak accident, as far as we know, a freak accident. And things like this happen, right? A bridge cannot be designed typically that it's indestructible. A vehicle cannot be designed that it's indestructible. I mean, there's going to be things that can impact your car where your car's frame cannot withstand an impact, for like an 18-wheeler, for example. The idea of trying to let's go and make all vehicles able to withstand a hit from an 18-wheeler. I mean, is that a thing that's happening on a regular basis? Everywhere you go, people are getting hit by 18-wheelers. Again, you got to have some kind of rational process, right? How much is something needed versus the cost of doing it, right? And if the amount that the thing is needed is not sufficiently high, it doesn't justify the cost, right? So again, this highbrow, let's talk about the infrastructure. Those guys are trying to make this like it's the bridge is falling apart. Oh, that's ridiculous. But let's talk about infrastructure. And Breaking Points even posted a video today talking about 8 other bridges that are potential, might have like a Baltimore collapse. Like what? Again, with my analogy, that is equivalent of a compact vehicle gets turned into a pancake by an 18-wheeler, and then Breaking Points puts out a video the next day saying 10 other vehicles that might be turned into a pancake by 18-wheelers. And not even that. That's like very detailed, because they just say might collapse. Not the exact wording, but something like that. So it would be like me saying 8 other compact vehicles that might collapse, that might turn into a pancake, as if it's the vehicle's problem, right? It's the compact car that just collapsed. It wasn't designed properly. It just fell apart. No. It was hit by an 18-wheeler. Weighing thousands and thousands of tons. That's why it turned into a pancake, right? It's supposed to turn into a pancake. A compact car is supposed to turn into a pancake if it's hit by an 18-wheeler. I'm not saying in terms of that's how it's designed to do that, but I'm saying, it's like an egg. An egg is not designed to crack, but an egg is supposed to crack if I grab it really hard with my fist and make a real, you know what I mean? Like it's supposed to. It's an egg is delicate, right? If I squeeze an egg really hard and it doesn't crack, something's wrong with that egg, right? The delicate things are supposed to crack. A compact car, based on the way they're designed, is not supposed to be able to withstand an impact from an 18-wheeler. A bridge like the bridge in Baltimore is not supposed to be able to withstand an impact from such a large ship. It's not, right? Anyway, so it's hard to even conceive 400,000 tons. Yeah, right. It's some posing that this bridge thing could potentially be something malicious. Yeah, that's what it is. They're trying to say it's a Chinese cyber attack. Now, I made a video earlier saying don't completely dismiss that. I mean, it could very well be a Chinese cyber attack. The issue is not The issue is not whether it could be a Chinese cyber attack or not. The issue is having that conversation and giving that conversation any significant weight at all whatsoever with no evidence whatsoever. Right? If we had some stuff, there was some other details, right? China a week ago made a threat about something that we did. We added some tariffs, and China said there's going to be strong consequences, right? And we get this Department of Defense briefing that says they're seeing a lot of attacks on our infrastructure lately. So the amount of cyber attacks has increased. So China makes that statement. Then cyber attacks increase. The Department of Defense makes this announcement, right? And then a few days later, after this happens, right? Now, if you totally want to dismiss that narrative, then you say stuff, and this is valid things to say. You say if they wanted to do stuff like that, they wouldn't do it late at night. True, right? But even with that being said, it wouldn't be such a crazy conspiracy theory for you to look at the China threat. China made a threat, right? DOD says there's an increase in cyber attacks, right? Number two. Then number three, all of a sudden this super rare thing happens and there's some stuff that's not adding up and we're not sure why, right? And it's like the power died at just the right time and all this kind of stuff. If you put that together and you say, not that it's a Chinese cyber attack, but you say, I wonder if it is, right? And you reference why you think this. It was just a week ago, China said blah, blah, blah. The DOD made a beef ring, blah, blah, blah. And now this happens? I don't know, it looks fishy. See, that's a conspiracy theory, but it's not a crazy conspiracy theory. That will be a conspiracy theory based on logic, right? Deductive reasoning. This happens, that happens, and this happens. It could be a coincidence, but the likelihood of it being a coincidence is questionable, right? But for you to come to the conclusion of cyber attack, absent any actual facts that lead you in that direction, that's the issue, right? So again, it could be a Chinese cyber attack, but anyone having a conversation, a serious conversation about that without any evidence that would lead you there is like just making stuff up or just looking to get views, right? Or you're just wacko. You're just conspiracy brain. Like, oh, it must be. You know what I mean? There's no reason to come to that conclusion at all whatsoever. In some posing that, I don't think, okay, I'm behind. Anyway, thanks for watching. That's all I had to say about this. This is Baby Channel. Debate me in the comment section below. Click on the like button, subscribe. Click on the like button, subscribe, smash that bell. Be well. Now I'm gonna go and try to eat something. I've been looking at flooring for hours now. I just came from, look at my watch is upside down. I need a vacation, man. I've been working too hard. I've been noticing like my brain is like falling apart, starting to forget things. I'm just doing too much. So I'm hoping I can get this kitchen stuff done soon so I could just sort of relax a little bit because it's getting insane. Insane in the membrane. All right, guys. On that note, I'm out. Thanks for watching. Whew. Stay classy.